Hello, I'm Michael and welcome to another video about my latest PC build using the NCASE M1. So in my last video, which was a build guide for the NCASE M1, I showed off this graphics card, which I bought as a temporary card. And what I wanted to do with it was just put it into the system, just to make sure all the other parts that I bought were okay. Things like the motherboard, the power supply, and also the CPU, which I'd bought secondhand. Just as I was about to fit this card into the system, I managed to get an RTX 3070 Founders Edition from NVIDIA's website. I was obviously really lucky to get that card, and I decided just to build with that one straight away, and I actually never used this. But then I saw this card and I thought it'd be quite useful if I tested this card against the RTX 3070, because I thought this build has a Ryzen 2600. And a Ryzen 2600 and a GTX 1060 is probably about a mid-range spec from a couple of years ago. It's not unrealistic that some of you who are watching might have a similar setup and are wondering what kind of performance gains can you get if you're just to switch to an RTX 3070. So what I'm going to try and do in this video is show the performance difference between the RTX 3070 and the GTX 1060 3GB. To show the difference between the two cards, I'm going to run some graphics benchmarks, and I'm just going to show the difference in noise and thermal performance. You might be wondering where the RTX 3070 box is. I did have the card and I even unboxed it on the video, but I don't have the card anymore. The reason for that is just as I finished testing the RTX 3070, it broke, so I sent it back to the manufacturer. I had an option to get a replacement card, but I decided not to because I actually received this card. I did receive my pre-order card from, I think it was back in September 2020. So it took a long time to get here, and it arrived just around the time when the 3070 broke. So I decided not to get a replacement. I decided just to get a refund instead. So this card here is the RTX 3080 by EVGA. It's the XC3 Black Edition. Watch out for a future video where I'm going to be testing this card. Right, I'm going to start testing these cards and I hope you enjoy watching. So before we look at the benchmark results, I just wanted to show you the 1060 card and how it fits into the case. If you want to see the 3070 being fitted in the same way, see the end of my last build video. I'll put the link up in the pop-out banner. Jumping into the benchmarks, I'm starting with Heaven 4.0. Both cards are running the 1080p 8x anti-aliasing benchmark. As expected, the 3070 takes a big lead with a 65% improvement in average FPS. It's interesting to note that the 1060 gets a decent average of almost 60 FPS. That's not bad for a card that's over 4 years old and only cost me £100 in the second-hand market. At 1440p, the 3070 takes an even bigger lead at 69% faster average FPS. The 3070 is more than good enough at 1440p, but the 1060 is now pretty much unplayable. Okay, moving on to the Furmark Donut benchmark. The 3070 has the lead again, with average FPS giving about a 66% boost compared to the 1060. The 1060 again offers decent performance with an average of over 60 FPS. So looking at overall benchmark performance, you should expect about a 65 to 70% improvement for the 3070 when compared to the 1060. Okay, looking at games now, when running GTA 5, the only difference in settings between the two cards was that I ran 4x anti-aliasing on the 1060 because of memory demand. So looking at performance, not a big difference in average FPS between the two cards. The 1060 is quite capable and holds up well. It does run hotter and louder. Here's what both cards sound like while running GTA 5. In Warzone it's a different story. You have to turn the quality settings way down on the 1060 to get a playable FPS. That being said, I was running at 1440p render quality and downscaling to 1080p. Even when you do turn down the settings on the 1060, the 3070 performs twice as fast while running both cooler and much quieter. In Halo Master Chief Collection, where I was playing Reach, I saw the biggest difference between the cards in noise and thermal performance. Running at the same settings for the first time, the 1060 did still give decent performance with over 200 FPS average. You pay the price for this performance with heat and noise though, with a 30 degree and 13 decibel difference between the cards. If you're interested, here's what that difference sounds like. Last on the list is Kerbal Space Program. It's not a very demanding game graphically, so the 1060 is more than good enough to play it. I actually saw a higher average FPS with the 1060 weirdly, but this is probably because I wasn't running a benchmark. Still, overall, the noise and thermal performance of the 3070 is better than the 1060 as usual, and this just gives a more comfortable gaming experience overall. In summary, despite all the good things I've heard about the 3070, I was still surprised to see how well it performed compared to the 1060. The 1060 still plays a lot of 1080p games quite well, but if you play esports or competitively, you might want to think about upgrading. The 3070 normally runs cooler and much quieter than the 1060, although the 3070 is actually louder at the maximum fan speed. Here's a taster for the fan noise across a range of fan speeds. Well, I hope you found this review useful. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave a comment on the video. And as I said at the start of the video, I've now received my RTX 3080. So stay tuned if you want to see a video about that too.